we definitely want this to be towards men, especially this episode and this conversation, because this topic is I think that we'll have to do multiple episodes on. We're talking about masculinity, and
Are we recording?
yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Let's go.
It's good to know.
Let's keep on.
This happened on podcasts before where people are like, dude, are we on the air?
Just leave it in.
Just leave it in.
Just leave it in.
Yeah.
But this one, this is a big one because on our last episode we were talking about growing up in imperfect circumstances, how just being a child of the 80s and 90s, you're inherently going to get traumatized. You're going to have, statistically speaking, you're going to not live in a nuclear family.
You got nuked.
Yes. You're going to have separation anxiety. They're going to be traumatized. Capital T trauma, little t trauma is almost inevitable. And I think for young men and for men of any age at this point in time, our examples of healthy masculinity are non-existent, and you can tell that there's a problem with healthy examples of masculinity. Just in preparation for this episode, I Googled some definitions, and oh boy, we're coming from behind on this one. That's what she said.
Dude, I love it. It's the best. Goes with everything. Michael Scott, do you think there are any communities that escaped our era, millennials, Gen X, from this that didn't have all these traumas? Do you think, ironically, certain religious communities maybe had a bit of the old world and didn't come out scathed?
Oh, yeah, for sure. On a microcosm, for sure, many, right? You can't say, I don't think you could generalize to communities as a whole, but let's just take Latter-day Saints or Mormons.
That's where I was going. I had that upbringing until I was 15. Half my family's still in. But there's also a massive price to be paid for that, too. We can get into that. But
well, so depending on your values and identity, LDS or Mormonism, the Church of Mormon, I don't even know what it's called.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
All right, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a bunch of benefits, like community benefits. Some people, some of my friends that I grew up with and met in the Army have great nuclear families and great experiences, have great examples of community, great structural support all around them, as long as they don't deviate from the tenets, the box. Yeah, that's right. But I think I know. I don't think I know a dozen at least what I call refugees from Utah.
There are a few, yeah.
Who are, whether because they didn't fit inside the box, or they didn't like the structure, or they had deviant behavior, like they like to drink caffeine or are gay.
Hard to help that one.
Yeah, exactly. If they any of those things, then it didn't work. So I think if you had a Islamic upbringing or an LDS upbringing or
Did it pause us?
No.
Okay.
No. Technical difficulties, but we can continue. Whatever the upbringing, there's examples of people who did really well with it. So I couldn't say any community escaped it, because for every LDS member that I can think of that had a really successful Leave It to Beaver upbringing, I can think of 2 or 3 that didn't. Mm-hmm. So
there's another one right here.
Yeah, sure. Do you have fond memories of the church, or was it more like, thank God I'm not a part of that?
Mixed bag. They definitely take care of their own really well. Sense of community. We've by and large lost what that is, or we're redefining it. But we're so isolated, we don't even know our neighbors sometimes. But within that community, you do, and you go and you help, and you get together and you have all these gatherings. And when I was growing up, church was 3 hours. And I've cut it down to 2 now.
Wow.
So, and it's evolved quite a bit. And my brother who's still on, we were just talking about this yesterday, caffeine is cool now. That
good for them.
Yeah, they're sort of evolving, which is nice to hear. It's less rigid. When I was growing up, it was very rigid. And he was talking about how a lot of that came from like the old timers, and their just beliefs about the world, and they were in charge of the church, and they said this is the way it was. You couldn't even marry a person of the opposite race for a while. And then one of the presidents, I think it was Kimball, changed that, said no, this is dumb, we're not doing that anymore. And that was like in the 70s though, or 80s. Like a little late to the game, but fixed it, which is good. And they continue to do so, which is nice to see. But I liked. Like Boy Scouts was integral with the Mormons. Like a lot of Mormons are part of the Boy Scouts. It's had its problems, of course, as we all know about, but that was great. Basketball leagues are great. Doing stuff with kids my age was cool. But then there was all the other side, which was odd. So church was 3 hours. First hour you're with everyone. Second hour you're with male and female your age, and the third hour is just with your gender. And I remember that third one, like we're all cooked at this point, we're ready to go home. And we had a guy come in to teach us about like a sex talk. And he didn't say anything. He walks in. This guy's like an elder or something. He says nothing. He walks in, writes on the chalkboard in big letters, masturbation, and how bad it was. And I remember these words, the releasing of these fluids. I don't remember the rest of the things he said. I just was like, that's only remember the releasing these fluids. So like, we're all like trying not to laugh. We're also like, what are we doing? And he was trying to shame us and say, oh, this was bad. See, that's part of the older generation's view on the world, how like, just don't do it. And that's the end of the story. So there are weird things like that. I'm sure that's changed since then, but kind of a mixed bag, like good things and bad things. There's such things called religious trauma, and a lot of times these things are part of those little micro traumas we talked about, or at least confusing things that happen to you. You don't want to go with it.
It's weird. It's weird to have these. I'm having a hard time like being a kid, imagining what it's like to be a kid in those environments today, where you have the internet.
Yeah.
And
totally different.
I had a hard time paying attention to school and church when I didn't have the internet on my phone. And but I don't want to get too far, of course. But what you're saying is there's a huge community aspect. All the things that you might think about a mega church. You had like your basketball leagues. You had your shame sessions about your body. You had you had a chance to meet and mingle with the members of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of good things.
Community was good.
And and a lot of things that don't make sense and are frictitious with the way that we live our lives now in this modern age. I think I'm enjoying watching the Catholic Church and the LDS make their pivots on like maybe we should let priests date. Maybe we should. They're trying to get their religion to be to fit inside of the societies that it supports now.
Adapting to the changes.
Yeah. And now they have to go back and edit the Bible again.
It's been done 1,000 times. What's 1,001?
Okay, we're talking about masculinity though. That was the premise.
And now we both become Buddhists.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that sometime too.
Oh heck yeah! No, that's so much more easier because everything's about acceptance.
Yeah. Why we went that direction? I'm sure we'll have a podcast episode on spirituality and religion at some point.
Oh, we have to. Yeah, have to. But so being hosed on examples of masculinity, I personally. Adults, you never enter the world of adults unless beckoned to. My mom was the only parental figure in my life until I was 12 or 13. So I didn't even have an example of a dude in my life until I met my first stepdad. And he was hilarious and funny and stuff like that, but he wasn't a huge player. He was a nice guy, but God, my life is insane. He was
Not boring.
He was like, imagine Robin Williams if he were a meth addict and a lumber worker, and that is and was John Lowry. I'm sorry I shouldn't have outed you, John, but everyone knows. Everyone knows.
He's overt.
Yeah, you got it yourself. Hope you're well. Miss you. We'll talk soon. But he was in prison, getting out of prison when he met my mom, and he was on a work program, and he was like the kind of the most fun person to be around. That was the first masculine influence that I had, and it was very very stereotypical because he grew up in the 70s. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and he obviously got into drugs, and high school was like his highlight reel.
Uncle Rico.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. So aside from teaching me how to light my farts on fire and to fire a spud gun into a garbage can,
I mean, those are good things.
Those are great things. Yeah. Those are great things. But yeah, so I didn't have a masculine input into my life aside from some drive-by conversations from my grandfather until I had a drill sergeant. And that was, the freaking, in terms of a organizational structure, the military is probably the most masculine organizational structure you could have. And the leadership, the direct supervision, direct leadership of drill sergeants is like the most masculine direct leadership you can have, because they're cartoon characters, because they're literally on stage for 16 hours and they run shifts, but they always look perfect. They always say everything perfectly. They rehearse every moment of basic training is rehearsed. So the first example I have of masculinity is a guy who is not only on time, but also sees everything that you do, which I've never had anyone pay attention to me before. So that was, but also it imprinted into your DNA, which is the purpose of basic training. It imprinted into the DNA of perfect parenting, because the tasks got increasingly challenging and your personal frustration got increasingly challenging. And as I complained, or I didn't complain, but as I failed, like the drill sergeant is right there to just say like, okay, get up, do this, do that. And there's no judgment. Like you can fail as many times as you want, as long as you just keep going. There's no judgment. There's no, like, even though drill sergeants seem like they're being mean to you, I've digested this so many times. I've gone back and looked at my journals. No drill sergeant ever said a mean thing. They never called me a name. They just pointed out what I was doing, and they'll say things like, "That doesn't make any sense at all. Why are you doing that?
Do it better."
Exactly. Watch you fuck this up.
So you knew it was in your best interest at some point.
Yeah. Well, their verbiage only ever oriented you towards the task. They were just trying to you were trying to run away from what you had to do, whether it was charge the hill, do a run in PT, shine your boots. They're always orienting you to faster, more, harder. Now get up there, do that. And they were giving you technical and personal feedback all the time. But there was never any mean-spiritedness in it. They never called me a single name. If you were slow, they would say, "You're running too slow."
Instant feedback.
Yeah, you are not doing enough push-ups. I don't see enough pain. And they were sincere. It's like you have to try harder to get through this. To get through this gate. To pass this test, you'll need to do better. And they say it with the perfect inflection and intensity to make it sincere without it being a threat. They're not threatening it. It's just saying like your performance is inadequate for the task.
Military can be so good for so many people for these reasons.
Yeah.
Especially when we're young. And that reminds me of looking at your picture with your grandpa at your airborne school graduation.
Yes.
Was he a masculine influence in your life, your grandpa?
Yes.
You said he graduated 60 years prior to when you did, from the same base, same place.
That's right. So I mentioned that. So I'm a stepdad and drive-by influences of my grandfather. And in the summer, I would go down to his house for a week or two.
Is it your mom's dad or your dad's
My dad's dad. And we would go horseback riding, or sometimes he would take me skiing or something. But it was like not one-on-one time, but pretty close to one-on-one time, like all day in the saddle, feeding the horses, cleaning up the barns, getting hard work, direct supervision. And so he was a great, and I wouldn't have defined it as masculine. It was almost scary when I was 12. And he's like, saddle the horse, pick the hooves, shovel the shit, like move the gravel. And there wasn't a ton of like feedback except for lunchtime, you know. But he was always very happy to spend time with me, always very happy to have me around, asked me a lot of questions about what my interests were.
Great.
He was very curious, very fascinated with how I saw the world. He's like, do you like theater? Do you like to write? Tell me about what you like to spend time. I told him I liked to write. He was very fascinated with, he was a judge. So he was very fascinated with communication. And he was very, he seemed impressed with our conversations and told me to encourage me to pursue writing and anything to improve my verbal, because he really valued that. So he was just wanted to know how you saw the world. All his grandchildren. He had 9 grandchildren on his side of the family, on my dad's side. So we're all much different, and he was basically interrogating us to see like how we were dealing with that.
Sure.
And
did he influence your decision to do what he did?
He told me not to.
Fascinating.
And I it cracks me up because he's just such a sober judge. I had enlisted. And he said, I would prefer you go to college.
Same as I got, yeah.
and I was like, no, I mean, like, I was such a dipshit. And he also knew he was talking to an idiot.
Yeah,
like,
we're all idiots at that age.
He wasn't trying to reason with me. He was trying to use basic, like, he zoomed out. He's just like, what are you going to get out of the military? And I was like, well, I'm going to get out of this town. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to learn some skills. And he's like, what are you going to learn? So to the point, he's like, what are you going to learn? And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to go to Ranger School. And he's like, huh, okay. so you want to be a man, do you? Like,
there we go. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, he was challenging me. He was like, okay, then what? And I was like, I don't know, man. I haven't thought that far ahead.
I'm 17.
Yeah, but he just was like, he's like, what's the plan? He didn't get the plan. And he didn't like the idea of just being a lifer, in the military. That was...
Because he wasn't.
He was. Yeah, he did 30.
20.
He did 30.
He did 30 and then became a judge?
Yeah, he retired as a major.
Wow.
And he went to law school and he was in the reserves and went back and forth with active duty for 8 years. And so he was a big fan. But he just didn't understand what my life plan was, because he had a life plan.
Clearly.
Yeah.
That's a lost art.
Yes. Having a life plan?
Having a life plan.
Well, first of all, he was full of shit. He didn't know. He got lucky in that he had the GI Bill, got into college, but he was fascinated with the law, studied law, went to Berkeley at a time when you could get into Berkeley. Now, if you don't buy a wing of the Berkeley and spend your weekends reading to disabled kids from African nations.
Yeah. Not enough to get in still.
You're not gonna. Yeah. So he but when 9/11 happened, I'd already enlisted, and he just was like, I'm gonna ask you a second time. He's like, just don't be in the wartime army. Enlist later. Yeah, right.
Wait, that's the best time to go.
Totally. And that was, I think he just, because my mom and my dad also didn't want me to enlist, but they just didn't have any traction. And so he just wanted to, be the person to voice that end of it. And he was completely supportive. Once I was, swore the oath and was off, he was totally had my back. And
so you were already in when 9/11 hit?
I had signed my paperwork. Yeah.
It must have been an interesting time to be there.
Yeah, it was. It was funny. It was just, it was really funny because everybody thought, including my recruiters, are like, oh, you're probably not going to sign up now. And I was like,
really?
Dude, send me early. I'm like, I'm done, man. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even want to be here. The only reason I'm staying is because you won't take me without the diploma. Like, I have nothing to do here. And
we all wanted to go at that point. Almost of us anyway.
yeah, I mean.
Do you remember we all remember where we were when that day happened? Where were you? What was that?
I was late to school. I walked in and there were like the teachers were all watching TV in the library, and I walked in and I don't know what I was doing in the library, but I saw the teachers watching TV, and then I looked over and the towers were on fire and everything like that, and I was like, I just stood there for a second, and like I saw that like I think the teacher teaching my class was in there watching TV, and I was like, so we're not meeting at 9. And he was just like, yeah, we're gonna meet, and he was in the Navy.
Oh wow.
So he was taking
home.
it in. Yeah. I mean, every American. I mean, it was hitting home for 300 million people.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was in undergrad and sort of figuring out what I was doing. Another time that I almost just jumped back and tried to go in, but I was getting close to finishing my degree. Saw the dad's voice of not wanting to disappoint, but being a college student, I'd slept in that day, so I woke up to it already happened. My roommate was banging on the door. He's like, dude, you gotta see what's going on. He's freaking out. And we just sat there, kind of like your teacher was just like trying to process like what the hell was going on. And I remember a mailman was delivering a package to me, and the look on his face, he was just like out of it. And I was like, are you okay? And it's like, I used to be a Marine. I was in the Gulf War. We should have just cleared these fuckers out before. Like, he was just, nobody could differentiate what those fuckers were. It was just like those guys in the Middle East. But he was pissed, like just hot. I think we all kind of lost our minds a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was like a sort of a seminal moment of like, yeah, this is going to change everything.
You don't need to have when someone is burning down your country. You don't need to have a nuanced view of it. No, it's the right answer. Like, kill them. It's the right answer. Like let's never have that. Never again.
That's where our minds go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of us. I shouldn't say everybody. But.
Yeah, I think I think that's hurt, pain. All emotions are valid, as you know. I'll tell you that. But I don't think you have to equivocate. I think it's difficult if you're in a position. I think the more power you actually have, the more contemplative you have to be.
That's great. We put it.
And I saw a photo of Bush before. I think it was on 9/11. He was about to give he was doing an education thing, and then he flew back to this, and got the briefing in the air. And he was like on his way from Florida to DC, and then there's a picture of him just like thinking before.
The thinking man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was like, it was like anguishing over something, and it's like, if you have nuclear power and you can deploy 2.2 million soldiers, with a signature, you have to be very thoughtful about how you frame the conversation, because people will expect that you're going to deliver on whatever it is that you should just say. So I think it's wise to be thoughtful. And I remember that photo in Time magazine of him, just because it took me a long time to figure out what I thought about 9/11. And
he sent you.
Yeah.
And were you in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Afghanistan.
So that's where we went first.
Yeah. It was. Well, that's a whole nother podcast. But
looking forward to talking about it.
We're talking about masculinity. It's all right. We're to stay on topic. I'm gonna give myself some markers for time, points in the conversation. So I had 1.5 examples of masculinity that were okay. My grandfather was very to this day, I model most of my life after the way that he lives, with generosity and compassion and all the things we're about to talk about. But it took decades of conversations with him to get that, like the depth of where he was coming from.
Was he in Vietnam?
In World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, I jumped into the Philippines.
Wow.
But just for the listener, we're gonna talk about masculinity today, and I want to come at this from a spiritual lens, and start with the two polarities of masculinity and femininity. And obviously, these are separate from the gender, the female gender and the male gender.
More archetypal.
Right. Yeah. Energetic. We want to talk about activities, energies, and associations we make with the masculine and the feminine. And we're going to go right to Eastern philosophy with the Chinese medicine, Taoism, and the yin and the yang. And I like this because the yin and the yang have elemental associations, fire and water. They've got geographic associations, like the mountain and the valley. So the mountain is the yang. It rises. It's forced out of the ground and rises up, and it is rigid. It breaks up the wind. It breaks up terrain.
Forged.
Yeah. The yin, the valley is a depression. You can fill it up. You can flood it with water. You can move animals through it. You can take up the space in the valley. But yin, I wrote also some ideas. Yin is the capacity to receive, to hold space, to witness, and I mean that in like spiritually as well as physically, just witnessing something or paying attention or observing. Allowing something into your space. Physically allowing, spiritually, emotionally, using non-judgment, accepting things. Again, the physical acceptance like an embrace, but also the energetic acceptance of gratitude, which is appreciation for what is, not necessarily endorsing or condoning it, but just appreciating what is. Collaborative. Engaging with others. So if I'm talking with Miles and we're in this podcast, we are sharing our roles. We're sharing ideas. We are not. I'm not trying to convince Miles of anything. He's not trying to convince me of anything. We're building off of each other's ideas. A good conversation is often like that. And the concept of integrating ideas or integrating, chemistry. So like when you're combining compounds, you get steel through iron and nickel, and a couple other elements create steel, and that's a new element. So all these activities, actions, vibrations, and energies are yin energies, and they're very powerful and they're very important, and they're not limited to males and females. We all have these energies and can use them. And then the yang energy, conversely, is opposing and opposite to much of the yin energy. So if the yin holds space, the yang energy fills it. To have yang energy is fire, to create, to build something from nothing, to consume. If the yin is sowing and farming, the yang is reaping and harvesting and cooking. To stick with the culinary food, metaphor here or analogy. Competition versus collaboration. So collaborative energy is like sharing, hitting the tennis ball back and forth. Competition is I'm going to try to tackle Miles and he's going to try to dodge me or run me over. And in that dynamic, we're both going to get faster. He's going to learn how to run with the ball. I'm going to learn how to chase. But that competing energy is what builds both of us up. So it still takes two. It's just we have opposing goals. And that conflict is very masculine. It's very yang. So butting heads, drilling ideas together. And if the feminine integrates, the masculine subjugates. So if we wrestle, if I wrestle Miles to the floor, one of us will end up on top, the other will be on the bottom. One will physically be subjugated, at least momentarily, in that situation.
I'm only a blue belt, so.
So, well, I'm a zero belt, so it probably will be me that gets subjugated eventually. So, if the feminine or the yin is to accept, the masculine is to deny, refute, hold the line, hold the boundary. So, masculinity, in my mind, is the useful application of the qualities of the yang or the qualities of the masculine. And my grandfather was one, and I don't know. I mean, my mom obviously worked her fucking ass off.
Moms try.
And she had a lot. She had a lot of the aspects of masculinity she possessed as well, of course. The problem is, and we're going to get into toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. When somebody is in a vulnerable place, like my mom, let's just carry this example forward into toxic masculinity. If someone's in a vulnerable place, is insecure, and doesn't have the strength and the foundation to steer from, then that aggressive insecurity leads to toxic application of toxic masculinity. So instead of filling up the space and creating and competing, what you'll see is coercion, violence, zero-sum games. Either I'm right or I'm wrong. You either agree with me or you love me, or you don't love me. Like, these are all things that my mom has said, and I mean, it was very commonplace to get slapped in public, not in public. And I think parents, moms or dads, are only using violence if they don't feel they have another means of managing behavior for their children. And my mom was overwhelmed all the time. So threats, coercion, zero-sum games, manipulation. I mean, that was just how she communicated because of the situation that we were in and the tools that she had access to. So the examples of masculinity that I had were either none or way too much. I didn't, even though I was boys will be boys, and it was a great time to be alive in the 80s and 90s in terms of, getting let go and having no rules and chasing, the other kids around the neighborhood. All those were really good. That was really good. And I got lucky that I got to express myself in a lot of really important ways. But I still, when kids get around each other and they're all in that same environment that I was experiencing, it just amplifies these behaviors where we would manipulate each other. We would be violent to each other. I mean, the amount of fist fights that I got into by the time I was 12, I mean, we wouldn't even count them. It would just be too many. And it has everything to do with how fragile our circumstances were and my identity was, and the lack of tools and things. And I didn't have any examples of a balanced masculinity in my life at that time. And I'm not being exaggeratory. I can't think of any.
Little T traumas.
Yeah, little T traumas. Just no masculine, no healthy masculine energy. And I would argue, I want to get into your experience of that, Miles. But I would argue that healthy masculinity is a lot of what families are missing, what individuals are missing, what cultures are missing in institutions like businesses, in academia, and just there's a healthy masculinity is absent from a lot of places, and it's not. It affects us all in different ways.
Absolutely. I think even talking about the word masculine, it's sort of equated with toxicity these days. So it's been almost deleted.
Yeah, well, I think and I get it because I without having to do a bunch of research and read books, and it's like without getting a lot of deep work on this stuff, you can't find examples at all, like that you could even like fictional examples that you could put on a wall and just like talk about. But so how much of that was your experience growing up? Was that pretty much sums up yours, or did you have access to people who are modeling healthy masculinity? Now, again, I did have my grandfather who was great for 2 weeks a year, most years, but that's not enough.
Nope.
And rant.
And mentioned rant. I didn't have enough of the absence of, and that was my own dad's experience. His dad died in World War II on his first birthday. Got shot down right at the end of the war in Japan. They were bombing an ammo dump. It was some mystical story where he was lieutenant commander at the time, and his commander just refused to fly or something. So he was next man up, and they flew in sort of like a V, and he was the point man. Only one got shot down. It's really odd. I would love to meet the guy. Seemed, from what we know about him, really cool dude. And so he never knew his dad, but my grandma remarried to another Navy guy. So my real last name is Graham. That guy's last name was Graham. And then when my dad's mom remarried to a guy whose name was Guy Salisbury, he adopted him, so we now have the last name Salisbury. It's not really our last name, it's an adopted name. And then he ended up getting cancer when my dad was young, and it was traumatic for him because he started attaching to this guy, and then they thought he had like bipolar disorder or some mental disorder when he had brain cancer. So they're doing like ECT and shit on him, and like just made it real worse until they figured out what was going on with him. So to this day, my dad hates hospitals.
ECT?
Huh?
ECT?
Yeah, they were doing that.
What is that?
Oh, sorry, electroconvulsive therapy.
Oh my
It's still
God.
used to this day.
I thought you were thinking shock. I was thinking shock therapy.
Yeah. The early days, it has its uses today. It actually is helpful in some cases, but back then, I don't know how draconian it was.
How does it work on willful children?
Oh, perfect. Is there a home kit? So that was a trauma for him, and then my grandma married again. So this is my uncle's mom, and he was kind of just the typical silent man's man, a tough guy. He was a fisherman. He taught my dad how to deep sea fish, but he was kind of harsh, kind of like your Jill Sargent without knowing you had your vest in hand.
Any sense of vision about where you're supposed to go?
Yeah, just yell at you, but not your best interests. I don't know if you have them, but it's some sort of masculinity, so it's kind of a mixed bag. And then my grandma shipped him off to boarding school, and he was 12, 13. So he had like zero dads. He had teachers and then just boarding school. So he never learned really what that was, and I think our generation got that shit sandwich handed to us, like lost fathers or lost, the boomers kind of didn't get taught how to do relationship. They got handed like, here's a bunch of money, because the GI generation was like, we just solved this problem for you. We grew up in the Depression, shit was scary, like go make money, get a good job, and then retire with a pension, and like do that. They forgot to tell them, oh yeah, and here's how to do a relationship. So that's kind of, they're dubbed the narcissistic generation, the boomers, for that reason. So and one of the check boxes was have kids and have as many as you can. So, yeah. Mormon family, I have 7 siblings.
Wow.
Blended family though, half some adopted in too.
Well, and on paper it makes sense, because ultimately the thing that's going to decide whether or not you live or die is your access to shelter and food, and so it's like being a productive member of society is probably the most important thing, and then anything else is that secondary. And at least at the time, I don't think there's any literature on quality of life and quality of relationships. I think this like an arranged marriage.
Right.
We're here to do a role.
Yep. That's kind of how it was for them. Yeah. Well, the task is fallen to us to do parenting, and I think so. That's why we see a lot of like snowplow parents of our generation, because they went hard in the paint the other way. Like, oh, we've got to coddle the kid, and like just like their generation's like, oh, we got to give them a bunch of money. Our generation's like, oh, we got to protect the kids and make sure they're safe. you know, and you got to make money too, and you got to go to college. It was like a double whammy. So we're trying to sort of heal the ancestors in that way. So he had an absence of, and I had an absence of, and then moms tried to do it, but it's not really the same. You know, you need the mom to teach you how to do the feminine things and treat a woman a certain way, and you know that they do a good job. But it's something about the dad that you need, and vice versa with
obviously.
daughters.
Well, what was when you were growing up? Do you have like if you ordered them, like, okay, my closest real example was this person, then this person, and this person. Like, who do you think influenced you the most, or did you get any examples of masculinity?
So my mom's dad, my grandpa, who was a Marine pilot, got pilots on both sides. He survived Vietnam, got shot down twice, got 2 Purple Hearts. I think it was door gunners and Huey pilots and first lieutenants were the highest casualties in Vietnam. So that was him. And he comes back and lives for a little bit, and then he dies of Agent Orange cancer. And I was like 7, so I got some of that. And again, it would be really nice to have known him long term too, because he was great. And they lived in Colorado. Same thing, go out with the horses. He'd show me about the horses and all that stuff. You know, it's, like Yellowstone. You know, we all see that show now, and we just people are like see that and like, how do I do that? Like you can sense something missing, like that archetypal man, like self-sufficiency. You know, you need the community too, but there's also something that's said about like self-sufficiency.
What I like about that show is the silence. They show silence, and they, obviously gorgeous filming, cinematography.
Totally, yeah.
But just the frickin' when they have the looking out over the prairie in the morning, drinking coffee, not saying anything, I'm like, that's it.
In the moment.
That's so good.
It's very good.
So, so then you're left without any of the vets.
Yeah, they all had great quotes, good wartime experiences, like my grandpa who died in World War II. He was at Pearl Harbor, survived that. He was on the West Virginia next to Arizona. So weird, right? Survive all these crazy things and then die in strange ways later. But and he got the Navy Cross also at some point. But I wish I would have had these guys in my life growing up. And I think my dad would have been a very different person, obviously, and I would have been a very different person. My dad actually didn't. He got drafted in Vietnam, and he was off to basic training, and they pulled him because he was the Saving Private Ryan, the last male to carry the last name. They wouldn't let him go. It's like, you're the last male of the family to hold this name, which wasn't even his real last name, but it was because he was adopted Salisbury because he had 3 sisters, and his youngest brother had a different last name because of the third stepdaughter, right? So he couldn't go. So he might be a different guy. I might not be here also. He might not have made it out.
It's such a wild thing that they even take that into consideration. I also wonder, because what if your last name is Smith? Because there are thousands.
we got a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, is it by Smith? Is it by your dad? That's effed.
Yeah. So we got. He wanted, whether he wanted to go or not, he couldn't. So I know the military has their.
What's your last name? Thomas. Fuck.
It's Julian. Ooh, that's exotic. You're
the only one. Yeah. So did you get? My mom was the biggest influence on me until I left home. And then I got masculinity done to me by her and other people. But did you have any examples of masculinity in your
freaking TV? If I was lucky, G.I. Joe.
So when did you? But your mom wasn't. She didn't set boundaries and stuff with you, or.
No, it was more through the Mormon lens. That was the template. She had her own stuff going on. She was overwhelmed, like your mom, kind of smothering me. Strict boundaries and then no boundaries. I don't think she understood what was what. She was working it out.
Rules are very important. There are no rules.
Totally. Asterisk. In this case, it's this way, but if you're in that context, it's totally different, even though it's the same setting. Like,
That's right.
What
Yeah,
is
yeah,
going on here? And then my dad was out of the house working, and then I only got to see him every other weekend after divorce, and I missed him, wanted to see him all the time. It was really rough. So.
Was that, did you guys, every other weekend, how was that for you? Did you get,
Terrible.
but like, it wasn't good time when you were together?
It was, yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I just craved it. But I had siblings I had to share his attention with. It was, when they got divorced, it was like a countdown to when he was leaving the house. Like, it was like a month or something. He went and slept in the guest bedroom. And I slept at the foot of his bed every day, counting down, dreading that fucking moment. And it was soul crushing.
Okay, so this is fascinating. I mean, we don't have to talk about it, but like, what did it mean to you? Like, did you feel like you were, what did it mean to you? What were you making at the age, what were you making that mean that he was not going to be around anymore? Were you like, just the fact that your family wasn't going to be together, was that bugging you, or were you particularly attached to your relationship with him?
More so him, I think, because he was the one leaving. I think I saw that as like my mom was still in the house, but he was going to be out, and it's like, no, this is, it sucks. It's scary. I don't like it. I feel like I'm being abandoned, whatever. It wasn't really fleshed out because now it's like 7 or 8, so I'm still trying to figure out the facts of the world. But I remember the feeling of it being soul crushing and just really sad and scary. What's going to happen? What does this look like? My mom was just a wreck. She was totally caught off guard by it too and unprepared. Crying in the chair by the phone and these images and like he's out of the house and I got younger siblings and I'm sitting there like I guess I have to try to solve this problem somehow. So a burden, big burden.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated with the idea. We talked in the last episode about abandonment and the damage that does to families. And the interesting thing is because I don't believe that it is physical abandonment. I think because like if I'm going on a deployment
Right.
and I know I'm going to be gone for 18 months or a year or 6 months, whatever it is, you can be not physically with your family and be emotionally with your family.
Yep, quality over quantity.
But it's also just like creating a spiritual connection of like, wherever you go, my son, I'll be with you.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen it done where families break up from divorce and physical distance occurs, even sometimes out of state, and the kids know it's all going to be okay.
Right.
And there's a salesmanship or a conversation process, several conversations, daily conversations.
Should be that way, yeah.
Right, that construct this world where everyone is still together, even though they're not physically together anymore.
Did not have that whatsoever. It's quite the opposite.
No, and I have a close friend who will probably never come on this podcast because he's a private person, but he, and I've told him this before, masterfully executed a divorce, like masterclass on how to have an amicable relationship with the person that you no longer love and have a great relationship with your 2 kids, even though they're across the country, just really delivered in a way that's pretty rare. And I've told him that before, and he lost years of his life to travel, to just losing sleep over the whole thing. It took him years to be even okay with it, and he was really struggling with it. But his family was like solid and like knew that they were important.
Yes.
And it wasn't lost on them.
Yes.
And I think if you're listening to this and you've been a product of divorce or you're getting a divorce, as I have and Miles never will,
knock on wood.
It's not the divorce. It's how you handle it. It's not losing your job. It's how you handle it. It's not having an argument or whatever. It's how are you communicating the changes to the family over a series of conversations.
It's got to be over a series.
That
I had one. It wasn't enough.
Yeah.
They were just fighting, and I didn't know what was going on. They didn't explain it. No repairing, just rupture.
Tony Robbins, love him or hate him, he talks about holding the frame, and there's a pre-frame, there's a reframe, and then there's a third one, or maybe that's like a during conversation. But it's like, if you're going to have these big set changes to the family dynamic, then you have to pre-frame it, and you have to narrate the pre-frame and how everyone's relating to it. Then you have to narrate the frame, and then you have to continually refer back to the frame that you all set up together.
The new reality.
The new reality. Mm-hmm. So that happened, and that was destructive to you. And that was basically, unless you have other examples, like, without grandparents or direct, input, that was basically all of your, masculine examples gone at that point. And you're only like 8.
Yeah. I mean, I had it every other weekend.
Sure.
He did just great when I was with him. He didn't have the tools and not really know what was going on. I think he just really needed to get away too. I think he just was like, I don't like to be Mormon. He wasn't born into this. He said when he made the decision, we were still in church, and he went and did a lap for an hour and came home and just said, I got to get divorced. And it just like blew my mom's mind. And then they had the talk with us, and then that was it. And then the rest of my memories was just them fighting and him like on his way out and needing to be out. And no, he didn't mean to harm us at all. And when we were with him, he was with us and very present and great. It just wasn't enough. And all of us wish we could see him more and have more of him. And but when he was a kid, he was off just doing his own thing, just run loose. He grew up in Hawaii, and he was out playing with his friends and just doing whatever. And his mom was running the show, and then all these dads in and out dying or not being there, and just, I don't fault him. Like, he didn't have the example. Like, the masculine lines were just destroyed in our family. I would have loved to know both of these guys, grandpas and such, but war and disease and all those other things.
100%. And now it's the men and women are both afraid of seem to be afraid of the masculine sides of humans, and it's a conversation that cracks. It doesn't crack me up. Sometimes I laugh at just how fragile some people are. Sometimes it scares me.
Sure.
But the onus is on us as men who want to lead better lives and also lead by example, to knock the dust off and this atrophied sense, these atrophied abilities, capacities, and energies, which all fall under the umbrella of the masculine, and live them and use them so that it's authentic when we have a conversation about masculinity, and it's obvious the benefits of applying them.
And it falls to the female figure if the male figure wasn't there. And there's a massive wounded femininity to my upbringing too, because my grandma died when I was 15. She died of a heart attack, but she was like the one that taught me how to shoot. After my grandpa wasn't there, she would call her up, take me out, shoot. Here's the 22. She was great, but here's a woman trying to do the man's role because the man wasn't there. And then my dad's mom, I never met her, and she had depression. I think all these guys dying on her, and she committed suicide. We're pretty sure prescription overdose was the medical report, but my dad found her in the tub when he was 23. He was the one that found her. So there's another massive wound. So he had his wounds, and then Carl, you want to talk about?
Wait, who taught your dad how to shoot?
My grandma taught me how to shoot.
Oh, your grandma taught you to shoot. We'll come back to that. Carl Jung says what?
Something about the unlived life of the parent will be visited upon the children. Whatever the tasks or the wounds or the things that your parents didn't do, you will inherit. And if you don't do something about that, you'll pass it to your kids. So when people come and sit on the couch with me, I'm like, you're the hero in the family. You're healing the ancestors. You're breaking the chain here.
That's right.
And it blows their mind. Like, I never thought about that.
Ancestral trauma.
Yes. You're actually riding the ship the other way.
Is did Carl Jung come up with a thing that is going around a lot, which I love, which is give what you didn't get? The idea of...
There's probably a Churchillian effect here where everything's described to Churchill or to Einstein.
I think it was Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly. It was Socrates. Socrates.
It feels like right off the shadow and right off the the seminal trauma that you have is it's on you to live a different truth. And
yeah, not your fault that it happened, but your responsibility to heal it and do something with it.
Yeah,
I call that the shit sandwich. Another shit sandwich.
I call that fucking destiny, man. It's an Arthurian legend, right?
That's a better reframing.
Uther Pendragon didn't have the capacity to wield Excalibur, but you know what? The sun does.
There we go. That's myth.
Yeah.
And they knew.
They knew.
Yeah.
They knew.
Same humans being humans doing the same thing.
So we talked about toxic masculinity and I want to just touch on toxic femininity. So this is not as obvious because when masculine behaviors you have to do, toxic feminine behaviors are they're in the negative space. So toxic femininity can be, there's this whole thing, this whole conversation could be another podcast, but in the coaching space, in the teaching space, we talk about ruinous empathy and enabling as things that you can do when you're trying to help someone, trying to connect with them, but you're prioritizing the connection over the authenticity of your role. So I would, in order to build rapport, I'm going to have to connect. I'm going to have to learn about you, and I'm going to have to share something, because it can't just be a bot, The
relationship will not work.
The relationship won't work. But if I give you too much empathy, so if you came in and you're trying to, you're trying to overcome your addiction, and I give you space to admit that you're an addict, and I give you space to make you feel safe and not judged to relapse, and you tell me day in and day out about how you're relapsing and now you're beating your kids, and I'm just having conversation, that's really, like, at some point I have to raise the stakes for you. Correct. In order to stay authentic.
Yes.
Because I'm not here to make you feel better.
You're just enabling.
Yeah, I'm here to help you change. Mm-hmm. Also, toxic femininity. Oh fuck, we're gonna get canceled real fast on this podcast.
Don't cancel.
Because porous boundaries are an example of an improperly balanced feminine energy. So rigid boundaries where I can't yell at always, no swearing ever, no matter how bad the injustice.
That'd be toxic masculinity.
It's too rigid, too much masculine energy.
Yes.
Too much porous energy is no boundaries.
The opposite.
So the way people treat you is a reflection of their character and your boundaries. So if Miles disrespects me and I just talk past it, well then he doesn't get a cue on whether or not that's good or bad for me. So my boundary relates to how he connects with me.
You're taking cues from you on how to behave.
Yeah, I'm training you how to engage with me.
Mm-hmm. Whether you know it or not.
Whether you know it or
being
not.
Unconscious.
Whether either of us know it or not.
That's even worse.
That's right. So when someone is in an abusive relationship, again, men and women can both have porous boundaries. This is a feminine quality, not a female quality.
Good distinction.
Just want to make sure we're
typically feminine.
Yeah, we're this is the yin energy here. But if I don't set boundaries because I'm afraid of disconnection, there's codependency a little bit too, right? Mm-hmm. Codependent, I need you. So anything you do to me is fine. And if I have a request, that's going to be a big deal.
It might be off-putting.
It might be, yeah. And I don't want to put myself in the way of what you need because I don't want to lose the connection.
Correct.
That's an example of, a bunch of toxic qualities, but porous boundaries and toxic femininity.
Falling on your own sword, in a way.
Martyrdom? Yeah, for sure. Well, that's ego. We'll come into that. Yeah, for sure. So these are all like, that's toxic femininity is usually how you're showing up in relation to other people. I'm sure if we thought about it, we did a little bit more deep dive. There's behaviors that are more feminine that are closer to toxic femininity. But toxic masculinity is usually really fucking obvious, and it's usually the reference point for masculinity. So when I was growing up, and because things were not right in my head, my go-to behavior, like I was fragile, so I didn't have boundaries. It was just if I had a problem, it was just an explosion at all times. Mm-hmm. So it was, if you stepped on my toe, I'm punching you. If you push me, I'm punching you. If you make fun of me, I'm punching you. I had no space to give. I was not getting any of my needs met in any area of my life, and I had nothing to lose ever. So it was always just a level 10 response to everything, which is, coercion and violence, zero-sum games, and everything I took as a threat. So I was just living on that end of the spectrum. And I don't think I'd started the work until I was in my early to mid 20s. My first therapist, who helped me he gave me the book called The Angry Book. And so I could learn what anger was about. And understand that the degree of displeasure I have with the moment needs to be communicated first to me, then to other people. So that was where my boundaries. I didn't have any boundaries, so I could only just retaliate through violence. Like I couldn't even communicate.
It's the only way you could take any power.
Yeah, that's right. So I was demonstrating constant toxic masculinity and femininity in a lot of ways. So that's great. I was in good shape. And to end on an example, or what healthy masculinity is, and this is just pieces of it. There's lots of ways to measure and demonstrate yang energy, masculine energy, but it's just drive to do anything with a sense of holistic success for all stakeholders. It's the opposite of a zero-sum game, which is a rising tide lifts all boats. There's more pie. When we all do better, when I do better, everyone does better.
Would iron sharpens iron fit there? Is that different?
That's competition.
Competition.
So iron sharpens iron is head-to-head. Like in jiu-jitsu is a classic example of that, where you're only going to get as good as the people that you roll with. Mm-hmm. If you roll with black belts, you're going to learn so much faster than if you roll with white belts. And it's not fun. So there's a fun element. Part of the journey is figuring out wherein lies the right amount of challenge so that you're actually enjoying it. Because getting choked out every day for a decade is...
You're going to quit.
Well, or unless you love getting choked out.
There's the falling on your own sword.
Some people, I'll do the research to figure it out. They did a 30 and 30 on the female basketball coach for South Carolina, Stacy... I'm forgetting her last name. But so she grew up playing basketball with only men. And so she's like a foot and a half shorter, physically not where she needs to be to compete against men. But what does she do? Her game gets so sharp. I mean, when you're playing in the city league against 6'4" dudes who are smaller, stuffing you, if you try to make a jumper and they're within 3 or 4 feet of you, that ball is going down your throat.
Volleyball spike right back.
Yeah, that is not good. But she got so good so fast because the competition was so high and she had high pain tolerance.
There we go.
So you have this juxtaposition of iron sharpens iron to the max, where she's the best, WNBA player in the league, because by the time she's playing in college against women, she's used to being guarded by a dude who's a foot and a half taller than her, and she can actually be physical, and has the spatial awareness and only needs to be right where she needs to be. And she turns into a great player and a great coach. So that's the high masculine almost. I mean, I don't know if I would thrive in that environment, getting beat down all the time.
I think it depends. I think of like 2 examples, like this during the samurai times. You would spar with boken, wooden swords, and you had to give your best whether the person was disrespectful if you didn't give your best, because that meant you weren't helping the person get better.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like a co-opetition in a way. So
Yes.
it was a different idea where you were doing that because, at that time, if you fucked up, you're dead. You got to be really sharp. So they would get after each other, but it would be a mutually beneficial sort of scenario. Another thing I think of, we talked about in grad school is relationship as dojo, meaning you want to find someone who you don't beat up on all the time, or you don't get your ass kicked all the time. So that challenges you a little bit, and then you challenge them a little bit. There's like that Goldilocks zone where it's like you're lifting each other up and working with each other to help each other grow. But no one is better than the other. It just sort of shifts backward. But it's so close. That's kind of the way you want relationships to be in most senses. And it's not going to be perfect, of course. But I guess those would be healthier senses of that version of masculinity, although that goes off the rails real quick when it's just about subjugation and I beat you and you lose and I dominate.
Yeah, which the toxic bullies, and I would consider myself, and I didn't think about this at the time. I thought I was the good guy, but I was a bully. I would go around and beat up people that were mean to my friends, and my way in was like they would be picking on me or picking on somebody. I'm like, cool, I'm gonna knock you out.
That's kind of cool too, though.
And in some ways the teachers like that, because then
regulator.
Yeah, there was a little bit of checks and balances going on, but you're still getting just as much trouble. Like
totally,
you're not.
Well, these days you're supposed to be trying to do that.
But I was a bully because I was so fragile, and people who are self-confident and self-aware are not.
They're not doing that.
They're not getting their jollies off of choking someone out. Now everyone wants to win, so you're.
Egos.
Yeah, in Muay Thai, like if you can land a punch or a knee, that's a good feeling, because you basically just, if that was a real fight, you just took that person down.
Yeah, it's a bad feeling when you learn that. A lot of elbows.
But in Muay Thai, the Jiu-Jitsu is a really good balance of masculine and feminine, because you have to receive the move from someone else to play off of it.
Spot on, yes.
Muay Thai and boxing is very on the masculine end, because the whole idea is to not let the other person play their game at all, and it's to dictate the speed, the tempo, the direction, everything. And then that's in jiu-jitsu too. You don't want to let someone dictate on you. But painting compliance is the strategy, because they don't teach you in many schools of Muay Thai. They show you the defenses, but they don't say, "Oh, you need to do this." They just punch you in the face, and if you don't
you
guard,
start to learn.
Yeah, you
get off the X.
Exactly. You go back. You got your tape on your nose. You got two stuffing. It's like,
I won't be there next time.
Exactly. And so the point is that the learning is physical. It's out of your control. You don't have a say in how hard and how fast it's coming. But the theory of Muay Thai, again, is you want to challenge somebody just a little bit past what they're used to, so that they can still be successful, but they have to try. If they don't,
that's it.
If they don't guard, they're gonna get they're gonna get hit in the teeth.
There we go.
Yeah. But what it takes is the person of the higher skill is gauging it for both people,
because he's in control.
Because
he's got the responsibility.
Yes, and the skill level, you're going to grow faster the more skilled people you're going to spar with. But people who are really skilled don't really want to spar with people who suck, because you're likely to just get a wild kick. And that sets you back a few weeks if you just take a shot in the knee.
It's like rolling with white belts in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You got to do it, but your odds of getting hurt go way up, opposed to working with an upper belt, strangely enough.
Yeah.
Because of the spaz factor.
Yeah, exactly. So we're defining healthy masculinity as drive coupled with a holistic success for all, a sense of holistic success for all the stakeholders. Your sparring partner's benefiting, your business partner's benefiting. If you're selling a product, they're getting more value than they're paying for. These things I take for granted, but as I've been in business a long time, I see that that's not everyone. Having flexible boundaries. So like, there's some things I'm less inclined to do, but it's not a hard no all the time. And there's some things I'm more inclined to do, but it's not a hard yes all the time. It's right place, right time, right people. Like, do I want to go and spend a weekend in Vegas? You could basically count me out.
Ditto.
If it's like 5 of like my old army buddies who I know are just of a certain maturity level, but that gets them away from their families and away from their nonsense, and we can hang out at the Sphere and see a show,
then maybe
I'm down. Like, now I'm listening.
There we go.
I'm listening. So it's not always a no. It's just most of the time it's a no, right? So it depends on like who, the what, what are you getting out of it?
Set and setting.
Set and setting. That's right. And then finally, pride without ego, because I think ego is what makes you fragile and makes you reactive. For me, it was feeling like I was so unimportant to so many people that I had to get power through coercion and violence and zero-sum games. And then when I got a sense of self and sense of pride, that like to me, like the more healthy pride you have in yourself, the more you're fine with letting someone get one over on you without having to.
Yeah. Healthy ego.
Yeah.
And ego is a word has multiple meanings from over history.
Oh, fully.
But in this regard, we're probably talking about ego and like sort of a spectrum. In the middle is Goldilocks zone. On the right, you have like extreme narcissism. On the left, you have extreme nihilism. That's all ego. Just the extremes.
I suck the most. I'm the best.
Yes, it's still a self-made construct that's not entirely accurate. But in the middle is something that's healthier, and it's still self-made, but at least it's healthier.
Well, I love the spectrum. We'll have to label it sometime of like self-defeatism, like low self-esteem, low self-belief, some self-confidence, self-respect. Like, and then getting cocky, and then getting arrogant, and then being delusional.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's a time, like, to borrow from our mutual friend Jocko,
good dude.
Freaking, he was describing ego in one of his podcasts, and he was saying, like, if you're getting ready for a fight, you don't want to be realistic about if you're going to MMA, you don't want to be like, well, the other guy's a good fighter too. No, fuck that. You want to kill them.
There's a place.
You want it to be one-sided. They're a great fighter, so you better have no room for like mistake and like no. I'm going to win.
Yes.
There's not and with that there's an energy of we'll see. Like we'll see. I'm gonna show up with everything I got, and we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But it's also like he's like the closer you get to the fight, the less interested you can be in whatever else the game that person's going to play, and it's all you, and by the time the door locks, you should be ready to rip that person's head off without any sense of there being a risk to you,
because they're doing the same thing.
And you want to be, and he talks about winding up for the mission.
Yes,
it's like training, you're making all kinds of mistakes, you're getting killed in training all the time. You're reevaluating, you're questioning your plans, but it's like when they're doing the real mission prep, like, okay, this is the plan now. This is the best plan that we can get. And then as they're prepping and they're locking and loading for that mission, the vision of success goes from like 70, 80, 90 to like we're going to be invincible. There's no room for error. Right. And I don't mind that delusion in the context of the arena.
Correct.
This is the best freaking product that ever has been created. This is the best freaking, this is the best freaking coaching session this is the best therapy that anybody has ever seen. Like, because you want to have the energy of this is going to actually help people. This is actually going to make a difference.
Yeah, like Jocko also says, intent has a smell.
Yeah, 100%.
He's a great example of someone with a healthy masculinity, healthy ego in a lot of regards. When I met him at the Mustard and one of his musters, all of his crew, they're all just so humble and nice and welcoming. And they don't go behind the stage. Like, when they're done talking, they're out talking all the time, staying up late, getting up early. Super nice. They'll just sit there and listen to you. They don't interrupt. They just take it in. And they're doing that all day long with so many people. Really, really cool. And I also thought it was hilarious that most of the people left at the end of the day when there was the free jiu-jitsu class. You got all this extra time with these famous dudes. And it was really a good event. So
I love the energy there. I love that because, and it's also carryover with the martial art community. Shout out to Martin Rooney, who is a purple belt, I believe, in jiu-jitsu, but a black belt in judo. And but I met him in 2012 at a fitness seminar, and he was just like had his backpack on, and he was just taking notes next to me. And in like 2 more sessions, he's up there, he's giving a speech, and the room is on fire. He's like the Tony Robbins of the fitness industry. He's like just lighting it up. And I was like, what the fuck is this guy? Then he comes back down and sits next to me, and he's
humble.
just taking notes and just a big giver. And it's just like the energy of the constant student, just and listening to him describe like speed training. He's a co-founder of the Parisi Speed School, which is a big school on the East Coast for NFL Combine athletes. But like having him break down like strength conditioning and speed training, it's like listening to Albert Einstein talk about the relativity of physics. You're just like, oh, I guess that is all it is. Yeah. There's a couple of crazy atoms, but it's like, but that level of mastery, I think that when you have that level of understanding, you understand that you're the best in the world at this context. And then you also can see all of the things you don't have mastery of. And you're like, wow, there's a big world out there. And I think that increases. I think the more you accomplish, the more you do, the more pride that you have and self-worth that you have in yourself, and the less you need to project and sell it to everyone else.
Correct. No overcompensation.
Yeah. Just regular compensation for me.
Healing.
So I think like the important part for me is boundaries, because with healthy masculinity, you know who you are, you know what you're always going to say, or not always, but you know what's serving what you're trying to create in the world, and you know how to funnel your attention and what you're saying. You're also know what you're resisting and what you're letting go. And like you own more of your power the more clear boundaries you have on things. And like my attention goes here, it doesn't go here. My time goes here, it doesn't go here. This is just the more precise you can be about things. So and all of this conversation, the feminine skills, listening, communicating,
accommodating, receiving,
hearing,
circular process versus linear.
All that came more easy to me. The thing that was that I had to lean into was the masculine, and I'm still working on, is creating and holding a vision, and not compromising, and being willing to disappoint people with what that is and is not.
Yes, you can't please everyone.
Yeah. And it's such a reminder. It's such a reminder that I have so much work to do on that when I disappoint someone, and it like hits me. I'm like, oh no,
they're gonna leave.
Great, good, like God bless.
Right.
Go find what you need somewhere else.
Right. It's not a good fit.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
And it's okay. That's exactly right. So I'm still working on that. And you showed off the book Men's Work by Connor Beaton.
Phenomenal so far.
Yeah.
He was on Modern Wisdom recently. Shout out to that podcast also. Good on Lake Jocko's.
Chris Williamson,
yeah.
Whatever.
So, great dude.
Until he invites me on his podcast, I don't care.
We'll get on there hopefully one day.
So you're working on your sense of, like, what do you think? Yeah, for me it's boundaries, but for you, when you think of where you're trying to improve yourself in masculinity, and restore and dust off some of these energies, capacities, what are you working on?
In this regard, probably same as you, integrating more of the healthy masculine, or what is that even? I got a dose of a lot of the feminine. A lot of it was kind of negative too, but my field, I think I mentioned it last time, is a very feminine field, is in the archetypal sense. Like it's relating, it's circular, it's healing, getting more of the masculine, sort of like back into the military, getting more male figures in my life, whether that's mentors, friends, men's groups, things like that, sports, jiu-jitsu. So there's more wholeness. So I'm not deficient in one and over-indexed in the other or whatnot. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And going into the more the masculine, I have to not forget to bring the feminine along with, because that's easy to do. Like you're focusing on one thing, you forget about the other, or you think, oh, I can't do that anymore. I got to ditch that and go hard in the paint the other way. And like, yep, that's common for the ego to think that, but that's not what wholeness is. You got to bring along what you have. You don't. You can clean it up and work with it, but you don't want to just ditch it or say it's not necessary anymore, because it is. Got you where you are, so still need it.
Oh, well, and every new level's new devils. Every level that you
Yes.
ascend to
Fuck yes.
will require a different part of this. As your business grows, this is, I'm quoting now the great Alex Hormozy. He says, growing your business is a process of letting go of gradually greater and greater degrees of control.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I start out and I'm the personal trainer. So I make all the decisions on the lifts of what someone does. And they, when they're in front of me, I can control how they move, which is not really true. But if I'm going to be the gym owner, now I have a gym. Now I don't control what people are doing in there when they're not in my personal training session. Then if I want to hire personal trainers, now I have to trust that the trainer is making a decision that I might not make. Mm-hmm. And so it's like it just goes further and further away from you. And now I have to accept and collaborate with and let the coaches have their ideas. And, here's what I'm going to do with this. And then as the parent, I go, okay, well, how did you come up with that answer? Right?
What do you think?
And because I also can't abdicate my role as a mentor,
correct,
but I can't control them.
No dictatorship.
So I just have to get into the thought process. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, have you thought of this? Mm-hmm. Does that, is that going to be time efficient? Is that going to work?
Sort of like centralized, decentralized command.
That's right.
Jocko talks about.
Yeah. So it's up to me to train them. It's like, here's what success looks like. If you can get there in a better way, cool. But if you find you're running out of time and you're stressed about your sessions, then maybe we should go back to a different plan. Mm. But and so you have to bring in the yin, the feminine with your masculine energy, and
just like the sign, right?
Just like the yin yang
looking thing.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Must have created that for a reason.
Hey man, I know. That's right. I love that. I love that you're acknowledging that. That reminds me of my friend Emily Corso. She was a self-defense teacher, and she would, if she would have a hard time getting somebody to commit to a move she's teaching women. At the time, she was teaching women self-defense. She's, I think, a programmer now, and among other things. She would notice that, okay, so if she was instructing a woman on how to get out of a hold or choke someone, they wouldn't really commit to it. And they wouldn't really deliver because in jiu-jitsu, you have to get to the arm bar, right? You can't, I basically have it. No. They're going to slide out.
Work for that.
You really have to get there. And she couldn't get some people to really commit to the move. But if she had them do striking first, so she had them punch and elbow and smash things, their energy was up. And then when they took to the grappling, they would be more aggressive with the grappling because the syntax changed, right? You've got them slamming things and then taking that energy in. And it's like, a lot of times, like we said with the bringing the masculine the energy for getting into jiu-jitsu and competing, it's like, so now you have that capacity and you can flex that and develop that and then carry that energy to the other areas of your life. Mm-hmm. That will just augment the results that you're getting in whether it's conversations or, whatever else you're dealing with, especially with, choking out your kids. Until you get with those home ECT kits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, dude. Well, so the purpose of this conversation was to create clarity around masculinity, what it is, even why it's important, how to get it, what too much of it looks like. And I think when masculinity or femininity is toxic, it's not too much of it. It's improper application. Mm-hmm. you're coercing someone and you probably need to listen. Jocko's really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, if someone has a different idea, I think he was talking about the defund the police thing, which is like, obviously Jocko's not for that, but there's so much heat around it, and people were yelling about it. He was on, I think, at the Rogan podcast, and he was like, well, these people want to defund the police. And he's like, okay, well, what's their plan?
What does that look like?
Yeah. Do they have what? He's like, and people are arguing. He's like, well, hold on a second. What if their plan actually works? Like,
what are we rejecting here?
Hypothetically, like, what are you like?
You gotta do that too, yeah.
Yeah, and like, it just always, if you're being toxic, if you're probably applying it in the wrong time. It's like, if someone has coming at you telling you that you're wrong, what if they're right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to fight them and coerce them and prove them, and make them do something.
It's the truth you're after.
You might just learn something. I agree. Like, yeah, the fastest way out of a difficult conversation is I agree.
Totally right. Thank you for sharing.
If they're right, I'll take that into consideration as another way.
Mm-hmm.
But anything to add on masculinity and how to do it?
At risk of making this podcast another hour, probably should hold back. I think we did a good job. I'm sure we'll circle back with a lot of this stuff in future episodes. But yeah, I think we got a good start to it.
Hell yeah, man. Well, fuck yeah, Miles. One more problem solved.
Boom.